your ear about nerd
About
stuff.
science.
I don't know about science. Yeah.
And I was thinking
We're-
about like talking about science while playing Call of Duty. I'm like, I should really get some views that way, right?
yes, that's what
Yeah,
my
he-
stream was.
What I
I was
do.
just playing games and talking about science.
All right, let me go ahead and pause the lo-fi. All right, are we all good slash ready to get into things?
D.
Alrighty, so Grem's not here to count for me. I think this is 38. I'm gonna guess and say it's 38, but I could be way off on that since it's been a second. Welcome back now to Ministry of Science. Chad, I really didn't advertise this all too much, but we are going to have a discussion today about artificial intelligence. This is something we were kind of talking about behind the scenes because in a couple of weeks, not next week, but the week after, we're contemplating debating like we did before with gene editing. I think this discussion in some capacity will inform what we're going to debate or not debate. There's a lot of different angles about artificial intelligence, and I should probably change the stream title to reflect what we're talking about, so I'll do that. But with that being said, there's a lot of shit about AI. I know this is something that JJ, for those of you in chat who are not familiar with JJ, we've had her on a couple of times. First, we talked about economics and the field of economics, since that's what JJ's working in as a grad student. So, JJ, you've certainly said a lot about artificial intelligence insofar as like how it's applied in economics, but for all of us like biology nerds, we're kind of used to all sorts of different applications of AI, machine learning, neural networks, that kind of thing, for like biology and STEM and whatnot. But I don't really know like how to start this off. Actually need to turn off alerts for just a brief while. Thank you, Karina, for that one.
I have like
That last sub slowed through before you had a chance to cancel all your subs. Oh damn. All right. Well, thank you, Karina. I appreciate the 5 months. Yeah, so I don't know how to start this conversation about AI because there's a lot of places we could go with it. There's a couple of stories that I had in mind, but JJ, I know you've talked a lot about it, so maybe you should lead us off.
Yeah, I'll just give like a brief intro, and then you guys can kind of you all can kind of take it off from there, or tell me like kind of where you were thinking. So like, yeah, so I know like we talked like off stream a little bit about like how AI has so many different, like the definition is kind of what exactly is AI and whatever, and like so I just like put together like a few like brief notes. Like so I've taken a couple of classes, so I like refer to those notes and then also refer to like notes you can find from MIT's open courseware. If you go there, they have like a ton of classes available in almost any subject, and they have like a ton of machine learning and AI stuff. And the reason I just pulled from there was so you guys could go check it out afterwards if you wanted to like learn more, you know. But basically, like you can think like it's kind of hard to define AI, which is like kind of the first issue. You can kind of think about like if you guys saw that movie about like I think someone mentioned maybe in chat like the math, beautiful math, whatever math destruction. I don't know, I can't remember. There was a movie about Alan Turner, and Alan Turner was like the mathematician who kind of first put together like
Turing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So he put together like the first like computer science like model you would kind of think like in 1936, and I like pulled up his paper and it's pretty like, interesting, kind of simple in the end. But like so if you think about it the way he thought about it as like trying to compute models that model human behavior. So that's one, the first thing is human behavior. If you can model human behavior, that's like basically what he did was so you can build a model that mimics human behavior, like some model that can play poker. So that's one way of thinking about it. You could think about it as like trying to model human thought processes. So the behavior isn't really what you're interested in, right? You want to see the process behind the behavior. You want to see why people make the decisions that they do, right? And so you're taking this process and you're trying to move it into like a computational model, right? And you can do that at two levels. You can use modules. Okay, so you can module vision or memory or cognition, and you're just trying to model the entire one process, and you're not that interested in what goes on underneath. So think of like face recognition, how it evolved over the past like 20, 30 years. They used to try to compare eyeballs and noses and mouths, and they realized that it was best to give it an entire picture of faces and have it just look at different faces. So look at the face in general. And they're not concerned about if it's looking more at the nose or just looking at that. Who cares? As long as it can recognize the face, right? So that's like a module way of understanding it. And the other way is like a neural way of understanding it, which has kind of gotten like some new pickup. And basically, like the old way of thinking of doing that, just looking at an eye and looking at a nose and looking at a mouth, it's basically, it becomes a math issue. It becomes basically the dimensions that you have are too large for the problem to solve. The p is greater than n, which is in most math classes, they'll laugh at that and say we can't solve that and move on, right? So that's what machine learning or computer science models tried to solve initially, couldn't do it, so kind of went to this modular model, right? But now they're kind of back at like the neural model, where it's like, okay, we see how brains work, and if we're trying to process how brains work, maybe we should, look at how neurons work and try to model that, right? And so that's kind of the most like the hottest subject that you kind of think about, but you can see how it's kind of related to, how kind of you can contrast it to modeling based on modules. You can contract it to modeling based off of human behavior and not necessarily trying to determine thought processes. And the last way of thinking about it is, so those are two ways. It's behavior, thought processes. And the last way is like an intelligent kind of way. So you don't ask the question, what do humans do or how do they do it? But how can we get something that is intelligent, right? Which is what the AI is. And of course, the issue with intelligence is now you have an issue. How do you define intelligence, right? So how do you define intelligence? I mean, we can go down that route, but basically what how they end up getting it to an application. So you could talk about theory all you want to. You can come up with amazing theoretical medical models, string theory, right? Like you can model a whole bunch of things, but we want to see AI in reality. We want to see it we want to see the applications, right? We want to see, either robots moving, or we want to see, predictions happening. So how do you take something that is really very abstract? And if you talk to people who work with neurons, they're, why are we calling it a neural network model? What is it really getting at? Instead of thinking about it in that way and trying to measure intelligence, or try to measure intelligence, they kind of move to a behavior, an idea of, maybe we can't define intelligence, but can we recognize it when we see it? So if you see something that is intelligent, can you recognize it? And this kind of allows you to let in other intelligence that's not necessarily human intelligence, or intelligence that maybe you yourself wouldn't think of. So that you and all your guys in your department, you're thinking and you can't think of another way. If you're able to model something that is intelligent beyond yourself, right, then they can come up with different ideas in different ways. And so basically they try to build models that are rational. And how do you define rationality? Well, that's where like the econ comes in, right? Because economists for a long time had like a definition of rationality, which is the mathematical definition, right? Which is if something is complete and when something is independent, which is a mathematical definition. Independence is if you have P and Q, and P is larger than Q, and if you add R, and R is the same value, if you add it to P and you add it to Q, then P is still larger than Q. That's all independence is. It's math. That's all it is, right? And so if you're saying something is rational, there's like the colloquial idea of rationality, but throw away the colloquial. We're just simply talking about if those two mathematical definitions of being complete or of being independent, and then continuous, meaning there's no gaps, right? So if I ask you a question, you can answer, no matter what question it is. If it doesn't make sense to you, you let me know. How do you build a robot that can do all of those things? So that's like the third way of thinking about it, and that's kind of the best way recently that it's been used to used in models. And of course, I was just kind of looking at like a brief like review of like the different types of topics in AI, and it's anything that you can imagine that you would want to have some kind of either, so of course there's learning, which is like one of the largest subjects underneath AI, right? So machine learning is like kind of a category of AI where you have these learning models, which are basically you just feed information into it and it comes out. And then you have, neural network models are basically learning models. The main difference is like how I was presented with the neural network model is it's really not as it's not the base math like is never as complicated as you would imagine. Like one of the best things about some of these papers, like the Alan Turing paper, if you look at the math, it's 5 or 6 equations. Like you could figure it out, right? It's not, and so like the basic neural network model is simply like just don't ever be intimidated by these types of things. Like you can look it up and look up an academic paper, go a little bit farther than Wikipedia and like spend a few days with it, and you can at least understand like the basics, which is basically imagine that you have two rooms and you're in the middle of 2 rooms, and you're trying to decide at what speed the person is going to walk in at the room. And in the middle of the room, though, there's 4 different tables where you could, and there's 4 different items on those tables and different food that the person likes. And so the person is going to take some pathway. They're going to either, eat portion of the food and then go through, or they're going to eat all 4 of the items, or they're going to eat, a little bit of this or that, whatever. And then eventually they're going to come up on the other side. And so all we can see is what comes out on the other side and what we put in. What is that path the person takes is what they call like the hidden layer. And you basically think of like how our brains work. It's like you think of like 4 or 5 dots, and there's just different connections going into the neurons and then out the other way. And so that's the only reason why it's called a neural network model. It's not. There's nothing else behind it. So, there's no other relation to actual neurons besides that description that I just gave you, which is an abstraction with variables. X turns into Y. What is X? Who knows? Who cares? It's just X, right? It's just a variable. So trying to take that abstraction and then turn it into a computation model has had some success, and so that's why it's kind of exciting. But the thing is, what they're comparing it to benchmark models that we already understand, right? So they're comparing it to matching models, which is like, basically if you have 1,000, if you try to match, 2 colors is easy. If you try to match 5 colors, maybe, imagine if you try to match, 1,000 different letters in a word, in words in a New York Times article, and you're trying to determine, if someone uses this many words, whatever, right? You have that many, you have as many variables as if you have words, but you only have one outcome, right? So you have more P's than you have N, and it just becomes a mess mathematically. And, so these kind of advanced matching methods have been able to kind of take the dimension down a level. So those are called like random forest models. And those are easier to understand since I just kind of explained it to you. You're just matching on a whole bunch of different dimensions. It has easier inference, meaning you can actually say like, okay, if this one variable goes up, how much is the output going to go up by? And that's what they compare neural network models to. And they do very marginally better. So, and the last kind of thing I want to mention is those 3 things. It's kind of like just a definition of AI that I was reading, that it's kind of a moving target, in the sense that what we used to call AI, we no longer call AI because we understand it, right? So they used to say compilers used to be considered AI, and now they're no longer considered AI. Same with like different shipping routes and methods that like NASA uses to ship different payloads and stuff off. Used to be considered AI, is no longer considered AI because we understand it. So as soon as we understand the hidden layers of the neural network models, it's no longer AI. The AI is a moving target. It's to what? To, and it's kind of, and so that's kind of, like where I kind of want to, open it up to just see, what are your, and then again, like, so those are just like some general issues with AI and questions about it. And again, like, the applications that I mainly do in econ are of the learning fashion, right? Of making learning models and using them to predict things a little better with like including human decision making where it normally is not considered, or doing like natural language processing with different, so basically like one the project I'm working on now, which is why I haven't streamed yet, because I've just been overloaded with this project that I've been doing. It's a project about housing, but I'm looking at this an old data set that, long story short, there's a whole bunch of like handwritten notes about properties, like thousands of properties in the U, like and I think that if I, basically the only reason I'm using it is to be able to get a better estimate of, what people were getting loans based off of, rather than just using categories, rather than just saying race. There's what it is, race. We're gonna try to measure race and use it for every single thing. We're gonna try to use wealth and say, wealth is the thing that changes everything, and it's just like, well, it's obviously more complicated than that, right? It's obviously a mixture of a whole bunch of different features. And so which one is the most important is depends on which outcome you're looking at. So that's kind of where, the human error comes in. It's just that you have to model it. There's no, not yet, at least, there isn't a AI model that has coded itself. Not at least it's been coded to code itself. Like, like there's, and so, like the outcomes that whatever outcomes that you're hearing, even if it's unsupervised learning, you're setting the parameters. Like in the end, when you're doing the applications, you're going to R or you're going to Python, you're typing in your parameters. That's what you're, and every marketing model has ever been used. There's, and so it's really to call it, neuron network human, and governments decide to give, it's just like they're doing it off of arbitrary kind of the same reason why, they make econ decisions that seem to not really match up with academics, because they don't,
Yeah. So there's certainly a lot to unpack there. I'll let Greg and Amber go ahead if you have any thoughts in relation to either any of that, or just in general your experiences with AI as it pertains to either your work or just AI in society.
AI reminds me a lot of CRISPR, in that a lot of the like fear and apprehension and lack of understanding really contribute to it not being utilized to its full potential. But yeah, that's pretty much the only that was a lot of information. I am not computer minded at all. So that was overload for me, but that was a great synopsis. I just get lost in the sauce when it comes to computer stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe we could take a step back, because obviously, it's certainly important to define a fair amount of things in the mix, but kind of like JJ said, a lot of this has kind of been a moving target over time. Like our preconceptions versus the reality of what algorithms exist, neural networks, machine learning algorithms, all of that might not necessarily fit a definition of artificial intelligence, right? Because a very common perception of what is artificial intelligence, we kind of think of the AI that the lonely STEM lord crafted so that he could have company because he can't date or something like that.
iRobot.
iRobot. I forgot what movie that had Hal. I can't let you do that, Dave. That one.
Westworld. Has anyone watched Westworld?
Yeah, I haven't.
That dating one, right? You're talking about that.
No,
yeah.
It's like a fiction Western 1800s world composed of AI NPCs basically, but the whole premise don't up to the third season. But
yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Premise,
that was it. Thank you.
Yeah, but the whole premise of Westworld is making you question at what point an AI becomes sentient, and that's the whole shtick.
Yeah, I think your relation to CRISPR, or at least the kind of hype around it, that is kind of it.
The hype, really, but also fear mongering, and yeah, absolutely. It's a good show, but yeah, it's definitely Gattaca is to CRISPR for sure.
Yeah, Greg, go ahead, because there's a couple of common examples of weird perceptions of AI, but I want to make sure you get your 2 cents in first.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it seems like every professor, every research lab is like trying to use AI now. It's like all you use is kind of like a trope. Like we don't know what the problem here is, so we'll just send AI on it. And the problem is like you don't know what like the positive controls are, right? You don't know how the system, the black box is working, and which system that you're choosing is so important, right? So there's like, sorry, there's basically like trying to show the computer like all the available information. So like think of the like chess, for example, right? So it's like, do you teach it by like giving it every single chess game that's ever been played and then it trying to figure out like what's the best path forward based off of all the available paths? Or do you just kind of like constrain it into the world of chess and say these are the moves, now just play yourself and figure it out? It seems like, unless you have like so much data that you really don't know the path forward, it seems like the second option seems to be the best application of, the broader idea of AI. And you give simple rules, a simple assumptions, and then it's more tangible, right? So you have like, for example, the chess AI, like the Google's AI engine that like beat every other engine off the block. And then coincidentally, this is actually an interesting story where like now Stockfish, which is like kind of like one of the older models or one of the older engines, has actually been able to beat the Google's. They don't maintain the AI system anymore, but one of the reasons why they think that Stockfish is actually better than the AI model is because they're able to go in and kind of like tweak things around. They're like the AI model for chess like plays in a way that nobody even understands, and it makes very odd moves that nobody can really like wrap their heads around. So it's kind of like an interesting idea. Also, like another real interesting application that's from like a simple game, like game theory, basically, a game theory application is poker. I think, basically like 5 years ago, like poker was solved through game theory. It's called Game Theory Optimal, GTO poker. And like, since that kind of went through and solved poker, now people have kind of been like trying to incorporate that into their play styles. And it's been a weird kind of like shift in the poker community. But in regards to research, it's just, for me personally, it seems to just create more problems. Because like for me, and like what I'm trying to do is trying to remove the biological black box, and now we just have two black boxes. And I don't know how
Right.
one informs the
So
other.
like basically the main, and that's why I say like there has to be a benchmark, right? So the basic problem that it solves is like, think of even a model, which was models that we tend to run into that only has 4 variables. There's only 4 variables, right? But because of endogeneity of one variable with another, you need 2 other variables to be able to uncover the real estimate that you're trying. So you're trying to see how much what how your job affects your wages. But your wages affects what jobs you work, right? So it's endogenous. So you need other variables to try to measure those, right? And if you have you can only, in the traditional sense, you can only have exactly 2 other variables. If you have 3, you can't solve it anymore. And so that's
Turns
like
into
the
a convoluted
main
mess,
thing
basically.
that machine learning solves. It just allows you to look at an additional layer. And of course you can ramp that up to so many dimensions that, like, you exactly what you said. It's like, if you just keep putting more information, how do you know the information you're putting in there is right? That's exactly the good question. That's the reason why all those AI robots are racist. That's the reason why, right? Because they're putting in only information that they have, or that we can gather, or that the researchers picked to put in there. There is, there's so much human intervention. That's why I'm just like, at what point are we getting to, some robot that's birthing itself and doing everything itself? It's like, it's just, there's so much structure that you have to put in. The only thing it helps solve is that it allows you to put in more variables than what's standard. And like the issue with it in econ, which is like the main thing about the if all you care about is the outcome, if all you care about is if I do this and this, make this tweak to this model, if I add in 10 more variables, it happens to be that we end up getting 10 more people to buy it. Who cares what those 10 variables are? Who cares? I can get more people to buy stuff. If I put 100 more, if I do this, if I take this variable out, it seems to somehow change it. If I put it this, but that's all they do at the guys who work at, wherever, Google, or, like I know some of these guys, and I ask them what they, and I'm just, the model that you guys aren't, so that's basically what they do, right? And so they just test. They do a whole bunch of tests, and whichever one gives them the highest profit, that's the one. Who cares what they threw it in it? Who cares? So if the highest profit ends up being the racist model, then that's the one that's going to end up getting picked, And so that's like the issue with econ, or like that's the one thing that econ, the field tends to reject, is this notion of predicting stuff based on the black of not knowing why, right? That's computer scientists. They do it, or that's people who marketers, not even specific denominator or group of people, just or a specific discipline, right? It's just like business people, who are interested in profit. That's all they're interested in, is in prediction, which has been, really good at doing, right? It's been pretty good at predicting stocks and different stuff like that. And so that's what it's really, really good at predicting what people buy, because it's really that you actually don't, your buying decisions are not based on that many variables. They're based off of a number of variables that I'm able to predict, with your buying data. And if that's all you care about, then yeah, you can't get to any more of a solution. So where do you go from there, right? And so like where you go from there is trying to uncover the reasoning why to do, and you have to go back to basics. You have to look at the math and understand, because that's how we understand. That's how we're able to make inferences now. That's how we're able to say, if this one thing goes up by this much, this other thing is going to go up by that much. We can't do that with the machine learning model, at least not all of them. Some of them you can do that with, like the simpler linear ones, which are basically the only ones that they kind of allow you to publish in econ right now. So it's kind of like a push and pull, where it's like the old school guys are like, what is this? Like you're saying, it's just a black box. It doesn't help us.
Yeah. So, I mean, broadly speaking, it sounds like, within academic contexts, with context specific to every field, whether it's economics or biology, right? There's always kind of this undercurrent of like, how can we use this as a tool, either, in the aspect of economics, like can we use this to like analyze how people consume, how people purchase? Can we use this to maximize profit, to use it as a can of gasoline for the fuel seeking or the profit seeking engine, so to speak? How do we juice up how much money we're making using this like really fancy technical term jargon laden tool? But broadly speaking, Greg, I think like you touched on a point within like the biology sphere, right? Like we tend to just throw AI at everything. Like, oh yeah, there's a problem. Oh, cancer. We haven't fixed cancer yet. Let's see what a robot has to think. Let's see what the algorithm has to think. There's always some sort of, a competition between like AI and doctors and shit like that. Can an AI outdiagnose a doctor? Here's all the diagnoses your doctor missed that this robot got instead. Are robot doctors the future? Like, I see so much of that shit. Just it's everywhere. Like, it's everywhere within biology, at least from my perspective. And there's always a, can we train a machine learning algorithm to predict disease based on biomarkers? Which, okay, sure, but to me, it always just feels like, and emphasis on feel, because I'm sure in some capacity I'm wrong, but it always just feels like it's all in the eye of the beholder. Whoever creates the AI can make it come to whatever conclusion they really want. And that almost kind of like feels like it explains, how all these AIs and other algorithms are like magically racist. Well, in some capacity, it's because the person who made them was also probably a fucking racist. So, at least to me, like, a lot of the applications that I see, like, sure, they might have some promise, but it really just seems like there's no way to remove human bias from the AI, because humans are the one making the AI. And that goes back to what JJ said of like, is there an AI that can like code and perpetuate itself without human input? Like, to me, that would be, the purest like distillation of objectivity that I would want to apply an AI in any field. You know, if it's totally autonomous, can we actually use it to remove the human element? But then, you know, you start getting into like, you know, Terminator style shit where, you know, is it going to become sentient? Can it propagate? There was that story about the Google engineer who like quit because he thought their fucking AIs were sentient. Like that motherfucker was just like, yeah, dude, the robots are taking over. I'm running away. Ban Google, nuke Google from orbit. They have sentient robots. Like,
You should go back to class.
yeah, that guy had some issues, but you know, that's the philosophical question at the heart of it is like, you know,
If that's like the route that you take, I think like for economists, which is what makes them different than computer scientists, is that they're not looking at that question of saying they don't care if you make a robot that's like a human or not. It's more
Right.
of what they're trying to do is, can we predict individual level treatment? So like the wage question is the biggest thing. Like actually after our talk last week or last time I had, like where Marcus, like you were like going on about like, you know, everything, and in the end you would say like, yeah, but the, you know, the end people a lot of times after they get out of the PhD program, they make their decision based off of wages, based on
Yeah.
how much money they're going to, based on how many hours, which is like a classical, you know, question that we ask in econ, which is like the quintessential question is, you know, what affects wages? And if you think you can answer that, go talk to Ben Bernanke and see if you can get the next Nobel Prize in economics, because that will get the Nobel Prize in economics if they're able to figure it out, because there's a million different variables that affects the wage equation, and we don't know, you know, and we can see different things, you know, and the one thing we cannot do is predict the individual. You know, you can predict smaller amounts, or you can look at smaller, you know, you can say, okay, broadly education affects wages broadly, right? But what if you could say, I know exactly what to do to make my kid become rich. I know exactly the variables I need to put in. I know exactly what to do here and this. They may not necessarily follow the path, but I know exactly what the path is to do. If you could determine, like, or even thinking out in the past, if you could look in the past and see exactly what someone did to get to, you know, whatever level, you know, if it's wages, that's like what we look at in labor econ, but you could think of any other, you know, variable. If you could predict an individual level treatment, even if it's the past, that's super powerful, right? So you can do all kinds of things with that. And so that's kind of the more of the econ question is, can we get like an individual heterogeneous level effect? And actually there's like I'm trying to find it, Greg, there's like a paper recently out about like talking about the chess models, and because like the chess models have become are some of the most advanced ones, like because they've been used a lot, because it's a simple, you know, it's just one task, just, you know, play a chess game, and there's all kinds of, you know, and so like they think that they maybe have been able to make a chess model that is able to pick up individual level treatment for one specific chess master that they model, because they had a million data, you know, so very theoretical kind of, but it's in Nature, and it was published like last year or something, you know. So that's kind of more of the economic question. It's just like, can we because then, you know, if you want to think about it, then the most charitable way is if we can predict individual things. One thing like I think about a lot is evolution, and like if we can predict exactly what needs to be done, exactly the right time, exactly the, you know, because like the issue now is that we have these models out, carbon capture, you know, or we have you know, tax credits, and people get upset with them because they don't work the way they're supposed to work. How do you know if a model is going to work unless you try the model? Like, and it's, you know, so it's just kind of this catch-22 of trying to come up with a new model that works based off of what didn't work, you know, and then, you know, then of course there's the people who present these beautiful models, and then there's politicians who take it and money, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But what if you were at the level that you could predict exactly what to do to maintain, you know, a appropriate temperature of the climate tomorrow? Like if we did all these things tomorrow, exactly 100% sure it could do this, or know exactly what in the past did this or that, and then you can charge the guys who did it exactly, you know, you knew, right? And so there's all kinds of like ways that I think you can actually improve the quality of human beings using machine learning in that capacity, rather than trying to build a robot that fucking breathes or whatever. Like, who cares? Like, to me, and so that's me, that like I get super exhausted with conversations about AI that go towards robots, because I'm like, like, what are we trying to you know, build a world where they give more rights to robots than they do to humans? Like, what's the and it's kind of like a weird, it's like we build things for a purpose, right? So we built the rover Mars for a purpose.
Yeah. I mean, I think like any opinings about a sentient AI, I think it's more of a consequence of like our tool gained a mind of its own, and now it's not doing what we want it to do, rather than like we're trying to make an AI so we can fuck
Like
it or
CRISPR.
something. It's not like that. Um, since Greg, you brought up the chess thing, since I think you've probably looked into this a decent amount. Do you think Hans Niemann had stockfish on anal beads? Yes or no?
Let's see. I don't know. I don't know.
What?
I just wanted to catch you off guard with that one.
I don't know.
So Amber, this is like a tangentially related chess drama. A professional like chess grandmaster by the name of Hans Niemann recently beat the best player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, but like it was so like unexpected that like a lot of Magnus Carlsen's fans were like, he must have cheated, he must have done something. And because at like actual chess tournaments they have security that like does pat downs and shit, they were like, well, clearly his moves were so irregular, they must have been from that chess AI by the name of Stockfish. Like if they missed it on a pat down, the only way that he must have beaten the best player in the world was where he had an AI that was incorporated into programmable anal beads that vibrated the correct moves to him at any given time.
I see, the anal beads is what caught me off guard. I didn't know how we got there from where we started, and that was my concern. So I'm glad you cleared that up for me.
The idea is like they're so good. Like you do this if you like do chess puzzles and stuff, where you'll get something wrong, and then you get a hint, and the hint is just highlighting a piece. So the idea would be that it's like 1 pulse for the queen, 2 pulses for a bishop, that kind of stuff. So then you can narrow down just that in your decision matrix. Just narrowing it down to 1 piece is enough that would influence the game, kind of thing.
People really thought that through, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, people have cheated in chess with like an ankle bracelet or something. But
I know there was another like text messaging scheme too, where like people in the crowd were like sending texts, or like they changed seating based on the move the player should have made, and then like somebody sent a text to say like, okay, yeah, we're in the right position, make the move, or some shit. Like they go fucking balls to the wall for chess cheating.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. It's because it's basically been solved by computers. I mean, it is an interesting thing, like trying to use computers to find now whether or not he cheated, and using statistics and that kind of stuff. And it's been a lot of different people kind of throwing stats at the wall, trying to I don't know. I can't say cherry pick data, but maybe they have like a preconceived notion and they're trying to highlight certain stuff. And they're like, wow, look at these, data points. And it's like 3 data points. And they're like, wow, that's incredible. And then you extrapolate, and then data scientists come out and they're like, yeah, if you just apply this to every single person in the whole world chess championship, like a bunch of people are cheating then, so it's kind of like, stats, I guess, is kind of like a lot like machine learning. It's, where you can kind of massage the numbers and create things. It's supposed to be, it's seen as this empirical measurement, right? But like a p-value or an r-value, it's like,
Dude, you have to come to some econ presentation with me. I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Maybe. I think you would actually like it, like because nowadays, like a lot of them are. I'm trying to look for the one about like, the chess paper, and I can't find it. And I'll send it to you if I do. But I think you would appreciate that kind of level up, because you guys talk about these type, right? And I go back and talk to my professors about these things, and I ask them like, what is your perception on this or that. And like one of my professors was, telling me about, like the issues with like academic publications. In econ, it takes about 4 or 5 years to publish a paper, even if you're like a top guy. The average for most other fields is like 2 weeks. So if you think, someone had plenty of time to review something in 2 weeks, that's up to you. The reason why it tends to take 4 or 5 years with econ is because they tend to literally replicate the papers and so like a lot of times, like in seminars, I think you'll get the level of detail you're interested in, of course, right? And then the end is that the conclusion is never as bang bang as what you would hope it to be. Like, again, they're marginally better than the random forest models, which I can sit here and explain to you without even using the board. It's just matching. That's it. It's matching two colors together a billion times. That's it, right? And because you have to sleep and you can't do, and so and just the reason why we can do it now is because they use these ginormous computers and they match, and those are random forest models, which are the best ones, and neural network models. The main reason why it's exciting is because they are marginally better, marginally, meaning the p-value is small, but also the estimate could be small. And it's interesting for us because as long as something is 1 epsilon better, then you're moving towards something.
You could do something with it. You can claim that you're making progress
But,
just based on small statistical, improvements upon something that's already a very marginal comparison in the first place. Like between the newer models, like you were saying, are being compared to like a standard where there's not too much difference between them in terms of the different ways to go about like predictive machine learning and the various like algorithms that you were talking about. I think you bring up like a really good point, JG, when you talk about like the utility of all this being predictive power. Because this is something that I saw a little while ago. I'm gonna paste it into the chat. I think this is probably an example of this gone horribly wrong. But it's a AI powered machine gun turret in the West Bank that Israel has deployed, and they've basically trained an AI to recognize Palestinians in order to shoot them. So, if we're talking about predictive power, I'm just really curious, like how do you train an AI to kill people? Like what goes into that?
It's not even that much. I mean, you could have done it 25 years ago with the same technology. It's basically just face recognition, and then this time they just have a mechanism that pulls a trigger at the same time. Like I could probably write that in like a few hours, that's super. Again, that's not even advanced machine learning. That is literally a simple, lasso model, which is the simple model where it's just a linear model with just a ton of variables, just kitchen sink regression. That's all it is. It's so like those kinds of things are, and yeah, of course it makes big news because it's because it's violent or because it's doing something, or you see Elon go up there and say some dumb shit about whatever he thinks his robot can do. And it's interesting because it's, you could talk about it. But doesn't mean that it's necessarily, it's not going to win the Nobel Prize in anything for creativity,
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly the fucking murder robot's not winning any Nobel Peace Prizes at any point in time for that specific example. But
and more than likely, just a whole bunch of dumbasses at C students who put it together. Like it wasn't even like that's the thing. It's like, oh my god, like this thing is so advanced. Like no, it's not. Tell them to fucking stop. Like make them like it's I just kind of it's a fear mongering tactic, right? It makes the Palestinian people fearful of this thing that can't be stopped.
Well, so now, like, based on your reaction to that AI powered turret, JJ, like the fact that you could just write that in like 10 minutes, it's not necessarily an indictment of the technology. That goes back to, I think, my earlier point of that's a complete indictment of the people writing all of this up, like the people creating all of these and applying these for various purposes. Like, how skeptical do we need to be of any given like machine learning anything in any given time? Because now I just think, like you said, it's a bunch of like weird tech bro Elon stans, Israeli apartheid supervisors, and like weirdos trying to just justify their next grant re-upping. Like
I would say be very critical of all of and if you can get to some kind of at least whatever meets your credential of far enoughly objective truth on the subject, like if it's academia or if it's someone a journalist or something, you seem like knows a lot about it. to try to kind of unpeel the layers. I mean, honestly, again, like I mentioned, like a lot of the information I read about tonight was just from MIT's OpenCourseWare. They have free lectures, and some of it's like I read, like that was the graduate level, PhD level intro that I gave, right? Like there's undergraduate level. Like, you know, if you have time, if you have the freedom and the, if you don't have, you know, people don't have time to do stuff like that. But if you're interested, you can learn, again, like you can learn the basics to at least be able to understand when you hear, you know, a reporter or someone talk about something, to kind of get your grasp on it, get a grasp around if it's something that is, you know, unique and something that's actually like moving something forward, or if it's just kind of marketing tactics, right? Because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
I
and
mean,
again,
that
it's like
makes
it may
sense.
be difficult for you know, for you to interpret yourself. I would just be pretty skeptical of any, you know, if anything, saying that it can do something that seems like it's too good to be true. But you know, but of course there, you know, facial recognition and stuff has become you know, pretty advanced, right? Like it is advanced enough to, you know, spot out someone from, you know, so say for example, you read something that's like, oh, you know, Elon can spot you out from 10,000 feet away. You know, you read something like that. I would, you know, go look it up. Just try to see if you can find any kind of, more than likely, as I tend to do sometimes on people's streams, it's like when we talking about something and I'll put something like a research thing in a chat, it took me 2 seconds to find this was not true. You know, like it takes a Google search to find the actual paper, and then maybe you'll see, oh, yeah, sure, it's at 10,000 feet with a margin of error of, you know, 8,000. Well, wow, look at that, you know, or whatever it is. Like, you know, you could, and a lot of times it's like you don't even have to be able to read charts or read things to understand it. You just have to read the intro and the conclusion of the person's paper, and they'll tell you, and maybe like the section that says like robustness checks, and they'll tell you like, okay, these are all the issues with the paper. Like these are the reasons why this could not be true, possibly. You know, and there may be some other ones we haven't thought of, you know, and it's really going to take you down a few notches. You're going to turn into a black pill doomer, you know, if you do that. So just, you know, recognize that you're no longer going to believe in Elon. You're no longer going to believe in your iPhone. You're going to just, you know, stop believing in all of those Santa Clauses. So, you know, just recognize like what you're getting yourself into, of course.
Yeah, so let me go just around the horn and kind of ask everybody the question. I'll start with Amber, just randomly. What criteria would an AI have to meet for you to achieve objectivity? Like, it doesn't have to be a technical thing, but like, you know, what would it take for you to trust an AI or a machine learning algorithm? Because I think that's kind of where my skepticism lies. Is like, you know, how much of the shit's actually worthwhile and applicable, and how much of this is just like a bunch of weirdos and demons being weirdos and demons.
I think for like absolute objectivity, you'd have to have an infinite number of things to calibrate the AI to. I don't think you can ever give an AI enough information to be completely objective unless it's all of the information. But personally, like for it to be useful, you mean?
Yeah. What would it take for you to be like, yes, this application of AI, I am okay with this?
I mean, as long as it's not hurting anyone or oppressing anyone, like I don't really care. And I feel like if you apply it in a situation where it's like someone's going to notice that it's doing something wrong, like they'll get called out. But
yeah, so
I mean, as long as it's not hurting anyone.
Yeah, so let's take something from kind of like the economics realm, like, you know, all of the predictive things when you're like shopping on Amazon or anywhere else, like all of the algorithms that are trying to predict like things that you're going to buy, things to recommend to you, like the YouTube algorithm trying to predict like what shit you want to watch. Like, do you think that's appropriate, too invasive, acceptably invasive? You know, like what?
I don't really care. Those? Like I feel like people care too much about that kind of AI. I feel like personally, I know this is an not popular opinion, but like I don't really give a fuck if someone's going to watch my buying habits and suggest things, because I usually like, I'm so stubborn that when I see something like that, I'm like, no, like if I'm on YouTube and it suggests a video by someone I've never watched before, I'm not going to click on it because I don't know what to expect. I don't know what content I'm getting. I don't care. I just watch the people I subscribe to. And like occasionally through other people suggesting things, I'll, expand my horizons. Like you showed me a philosophy tube, but I'm not going to find a philosophy tube video on my own. And if it comes up in my recommended, I'm not going to watch it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But I feel like the suggesting algorithms are just kind of useless. And I don't really care. Like, if they're going to try to suggest things that I would like, then okay, sure.
Well, so I mean that's really interesting, because what you more or less described is just like a reflexive rejection of it, regardless of what it's recommending to you, solely on the basis that it's
I have that with
recommending you
everything.
anything.
Yeah. Any recommendation, whether it's AI or someone telling me that I should watch it, like unless I'm like watching a stream and they watch it and I happen to see it, I'm not going to go watch it. I don't know why. That's just how I've always been. Like my friend was like, you need to watch Game of Thrones. You'll love Game of Thrones. The show's so good. And I didn't watch it for like 2 years. So, but I did watch it eventually, but it wasn't because of her suggesting it. It was just because I saw a trailer and I was like, okay.
Yeah, you did it on your own terms. I mean,
exactly.
If we're taking like the hyper capitalist perspective to what you just said, they would basically like take all that information and be like, okay, we need to be like more sort of beneath the surface, more insidious, so it's not apparent that there is an algorithm recommending things to you, to try and almost like sneak in under the radar, so to speak, like below your perception, to try and feed you content. But that seems like the back and forth push and pull, kind of like JJ was saying, right? Like there's always this profit-seeking motive, this profit-seeking behavior that underlies the application
but
of
how
AI.
are they gonna do that? Like, let's say YouTube, how are they gonna make it more covert if it's just a completely separate channel?
Well, yeah, if it's a completely separate like section of like, here's what we're recommending you, then yeah, you're kind of giving up.
No, I don't
game.
mean I like, even if they don't label it as recommended, like how are they, if it's just like covertly suggesting YouTube videos, like I'm gonna see who did the YouTube video and I'm gonna be like, nah,
Well, yeah,
or like Amazon, they'll suggest a product that I don't need and I'm like, no.
Yeah, well, I mean, with the Amazon thing, that's more of, I think, it's just more like comical, right? Because that's just like, here's this random fucking, I don't know, plunger, buy it now. Like, no, what the fuck? I'm not going to do that. But
I don't know. I just have a very like laissez-faire way of viewing AI. Like, I don't really care, even if they found like the holy grail of recommendations for me that I ended up clicking on for the first time or 10th time or whatever. Like, good for me for getting a recommended like good product that I want, but also like I don't really care that they're watching my buying habits.
We'll see, because chat's kind of bringing up a pretty interesting point, in that like places like YouTube and other social media, Facebook. I don't know to what extent Twitter does this, with like whatever tweets they stick in your feed as a here's a recommended thing
based on your likes,
right? Based on people that you follow and what they like. Here's something for you. Like it's kind of like 7 degrees of some random follower on your fucking account.
Yeah.
But a lot of these algorithms tend to, like, I don't know, for the sake of either running ads or plugging certain things or just feeding you content so you stay on a platform, it directs people into certain silos of information. Like there's kind of this informational ethics component of it too, where if you like, Hog Lover 420's post on Facebook who is saying vaccines are bad, then now you're going to get a shit ton of like other anti-vax posts and shit being thrown into your algorithm that kind of sends you down a pipeline, or at least silos you in terms of a specific informational space. The converse could probably happen in some capacity. Granted, there's less.
Like my journey with BreadTube.
Yeah, like straight up, like honestly.
No, and I get that. Like, I get that there are definitely pipelines that people like end up falling down. I don't know. I just, it's hard for me to relate to it causing harm because for me, it's never like caused harm that I can tell. So it's always like, I don't know. It's just, that's a hole in my empathy. I have empathy everywhere, but that's just one that I just don't know.
Well, I mean, that to me would suggest there's a fair amount of it that happens covertly that you're not aware of. Because I would argue, it's a
That's
radicalizing
fine.
force for people, for sure. It could, I mean,
Yeah.
it could work for good or bad, but you know, the people who run these platforms, they don't give a fuck what content they're serving you as long as you're staying on there to watch ads. You know,
Yeah.
that's how they make
And
money.
people are exploitable, right? Like we know that because marketing exists. And I think that's the real danger. It's like you're easily manipulated and taken advantage of and exploited. So now you can be more pernicious, more like, you know, like for example, like Walmart knows you're pregnant before your parents do a lot of the time because you're searching for things that are related to pre-pregnancies or, you know, and then they have a code thing that's like this person's pregnant. We're gonna start saying them.
But
this
like,
stuff.
why does that matter?
No, that's just an example. I'm not saying that that's negative.
I guess that's where my brain always goes. Aside from the like radicalization pipelines, I guess with like consumerism, I just like if Google knows your search habits, why does it matter? Like what is the end goal that everyone is so afraid of with these companies having this information? Like they're going to market to you better. Like I understand that that's shitty, but like,
Well, so I think there's two things we could unpack here, right? I think, you know, JJ, I think, did a really good job of like delineating, you know, here's a lot of the technical applications, like here's how my field uses it, here's how other fields could potentially use it. You know, a lot of the underlying technical components are pretty straightforward in terms of, you know, copying, pasting, and applying to a variety of other fields and other uses. But I think that kind of builds up to like, okay, there's one really big use in like marketing, profiteering, profit seeking. And kind of where I'm hinting at is there's this like, I guess, umbrella of informational ethics that covers like radicalization pipelines and invasions of privacy, right? That notion of like,
so
they're thinking for you, trying to sort of incept, you know, products into your feed or incept videos into your YouTube recommended or incept posts into your Facebook and Twitter feeds. So that way you think a certain way, you listen to certain people, you consume certain types of information that, you know, depending on who's like buying, you know, ad buys for some of the shit. Like Cambridge Analytica is a really good example of kind of how this works, right? Like they bought ads to essentially fuck with people's algorithms and throw people down like conservative pipelines on Facebook and shit with all of this like marketing information that they bought from Facebook. Like they took that marketing information, used that to build the model to predict what political affiliations insert Facebook user here would have, use that to sell them politically charged ads for candidates and, you know, right-wing content creators that serve them, you know, conspiracy theory, false information, and threw them down a fucking pipeline. So like they took that information
That's
that would
almost
otherwise be used. Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
They went and used the model, the Facebook algorithm themselves, and they put out, Cambridge Analytica put 1,000 different types of ads out there, and the Facebook algorithm figured out who was going to click on that ad the most. So then they actually. Yeah, and that's the crazy part is that they didn't. The old school way is like, okay, we're gonna like ask 1,000 people which ad is the best and which one is better and why are you saying you like this more and all that kind of stuff, and then you tailor that to which county or state that you think like, has those values. That's like old school. Cambridge Analytica and Trump 2016 pretty much figured out that like we can figure out 1,000 different ads, push them all at the same time at Facebook, and then Facebook's own algorithm is going to push them towards the people
it's the exact
that they
same
think.
process. The
Yeah,
only difference is that the computer is doing it, and there's 1,000 variables. But it's still, if you think about it, as it's still going through that same process of, you know, how many, you know, what do they think about this? What do they think about that? And it's just instead of having a human surveyor who has bias, right, including biases and them writing down the answer that the person put in to whatever. Yeah, they can make better predictions when they are using a computer to run all of those things.
I guess my like main hang up with AI and people's concern mainly about invasion of privacy. Ignoring the pipeline stuff, I'm mostly talking about consumerism or like Google having your search history or whatever. I just like, it's so hard for us to even store sequencing data and like process sequencing data for DNA. like, I don't understand why that's an invasion of my personal life when I'm just one number in like millions of people. Like,
I think
it
there's
doesn't
a
really.
difference between like there's different types of AI machine learning is kind of like the issue, right? Because if you think of it just like marketing or what you're saying, you're just taking a whole bunch of variables and putting it. I feel the same way, maybe other people, but people tend to they think of AI, they don't think of large data sets and they think of the government watching me, this happening to me, or
Exactly.
this type of thing. This is
Exactly.
gonna
That's my
well,
hang
gonna
up
come
with
after
the.
me,
Yeah.
it's like, what do you?
That's my hang up with the AI discussion is it always ends up being a matter of like personal
Or
privacy,
that a
but like,
robot is going to come to life and destroy you. Like that's
oh
there's
yeah, or that. But like,
a fear of and it's just like that's not building a brain and the normal machine learning predicting is not. They're not even the same. They both use math, like, and sometimes you talk about them in the same class. Maybe like they're barely they're only related on a mathematical level. Relate basically the way derivatives and one derivative is related to another. It's just they all use derivatives and but like a simple lasso regression is mostly what is marketing and mostly what and it's not just like the moving target of AI. It's not what we would call AI anymore. It's not the same thing that people are talking about when they're talking about robots coming to life. It's simply a whole bunch of data in a model, and just the fact that what you mentioned, the computers are bigger now, they can run bigger models. That's it. That's all marketing data. The YouTube algorithm, go look it up. It's simply is a lasso regression. It's not that difficult.
But it's not. It's just. I mean, a lot of data is being stored right now that isn't even being analyzed. So the NSA has, their huge storehouses of servers is just to archive the internet. Like anything that's like going through the internet is just being saved for like.
Is it though?
It is.
Is
anything
everything
that
being saved?
This
like
is what the Edward
every
Snowden
single
revolutions
thing
were all about. I mean, this is what he was
I
talking
mean, like,
about.
okay, but even if it's being stored, it takes so much computing power to go through that and find whatever you're looking for. And like,
With
I don't know.
computers
It's
now.
just,
With computers now, but think about computers
Oh
in the
my God.
future, and actually a lot of the human rights issues that we're talking about in Europe and stuff, they call this the right to forget. And I think that this is a really interesting way of thinking about it, where it's like everyone has the right to their own privacy, and that like not every single thing in their life is going to like follow them and define them for the for the rest of their lives. The ability to kind of like just like personally, I think that people have ownership of their own data, like their own personal like viewing data and all that kind of stuff. In theory,
well,
I
in
don't
that
have
case,
a
then
problem
anytime
with
you
Google.
talk to someone, like you should own whatever you say. And like that person can't ever go tell someone else what you said. Like that's just not how information works. It's passed around. And we're in this age of information. There's no avoiding someone you don't know knowing what you know. That's there's no way.
I think the difference between kind of like what we're bringing up and what you just said, Amber, is the fact that like the concern lies more with like whether it's what people perceive to be AI or machine learning, neural networks, whatever. That as a tool then being applied by people with more power over you, like the government, law enforcement, or like
retroactively
technology companies like Google, who have this information, then could share it with the government or law enforcement. Like it's kind of analogous to like if you were to do a 23andMe, now 23andMe has your DNA, and if it ever got subpoenaed by law enforcement, they would comply, and now they have your DNA. So don't commit any crimes if you get a 23andMe because they got your fucking DNA. But like it's more about how the information is used in relation to power, in relation to what powerful entities are employing algorithms, lasso regressions, everything as a tool to get what they want.
But what's the alternative here? Like we can go back and forth about the problematic nature of it all day long, but unless you have an alternative to something like this, like what?
You allow people to delete their data from the servers. if they want to.
From every
All I
single
have-
server
Yeah.
ever.
I've been
Yeah.
like looking through some data recently for like a project, and I was looking back at like the 1920 census. I'm like, God damn it! I wish data collection was better back then. Like, I wish I had actual data on this stuff. I wish I had data on anything. I wish I had data from how much blood level was in children from Alabama, more than just the years from 2011, 2015. I'm like, where are the other years? Why there are there no other years? Like, it's so there's a whole bunch of data that we don't we don't have that I wish I had as a researcher, like, that is not being collected. Like, I don't like, like the fear of data being collected is like, I think also like it's kind of misplaced, because it's like the issue isn't that data can be collected. Data has always been able to be collected. Like, it just can be collected at a better rate. Like, the issue is what's it being used for, who's using it.
Right.
Can we educate people to stop electing these goddamn morons who think Elon is impressive when he's not?
See,
Like,
that makes more sense in like being concerned about how it's being used. I mean, I don't know. I get it, but like it
We'll see, but like the higher order question is like, we have a tool, and the tool itself is being abused for purposes that some of them are really bad, some of them are just generally bad, but can also be used for good things. I think JJ brings up a good point that like there's certainly a lot of places where machine learning algorithms, neural networks could be applied to where it would be a really big benefit for all sorts of academic research across a plurality of fields. So it's less about like, oh my God, ban all of these things from society, period. I don't think anybody's really any serious person wouldn't advocate for that. But, when we have the state that we're in when it comes to America and how information is certainly weaponized against the average person, that is a framework where this tool is being abused. And ideally, I would advocate for regulation of how that tool is used by people in power. That goes back to what JJ just said, right? Like, it's all about who is using the tool for nefarious reasons, whether it's profit seeking, whether it's surveillance, invasions of privacy, whether it's... Go ahead.
So it's just like CRISPR. Like,
Right.
it just keeps coming back to being like CRISPR. Like,
It's a new technology,
it's
just
a
like
useful
CRISPR,
tool, but
Yeah,
implementation is what matters. And I get that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the fear mongering gets old after a while, of people talking about AI watching your buying habits and your search history and the government spying on you. It just gets so fucking old. I've gotten to the point where I like shut down anytime like AI or surveillance is brought up, because it always erodes to that, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
and I
we're used to
understand the
hearing
fear there.
hogs, like that.
Exactly,
We just
and
consume
that's-
hog content too much. We're too lost in the sauce.
Exactly. I think that must be what it is. Like, it's just from all the hog content I've watched about the government watching us and the 5G towers and the fucking microchips, that now at this point, anytime anything like that's brought up, I'm like, please stop. My God. Even if it's not 5G and fucking microchips in the COVID vaccines.
Right, it's because they're going to use any technology that's out there to, I don't know if you guys remember when the atomic bomb went off, but there were no fucking neural network models. But like, like the idea that this is going to destroy us, it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, we can destroy ourselves without that, definitely, and I think it's more of just like, it's already out there, so crying about it being out there is
I mean, in the end,
decades. You should just learn about it and try to use it for good reasons,
And in the end, it's
that,
it's like CRISPR, where the root of the problem is capitalism inherently. Like, if it weren't for capitalism, AI wouldn't be so
perceived to be used so terribly. Like, I'm not even sure if like there even is used for much of anything. That's again, it's like, it's kind of a moving target. It's used as a fear tactic, I think, more than anything. Just a fear tactic, and people who maybe don't think they know as much, to get them to think that you're dumb and you don't know, and we have these magical models that no one could beat, and and it's just not true. They're not magic. You could take a class on it. It may take you, you may get a C. It's okay, but it's just like, you can't understand it. Like, it's not, it's honestly not rocket science. Rocket science is still slightly harder because they use imaginary models and stuff, imaginary numbers and stuff, which machine learning, by the way, is only in discrete So just even think about that. Okay.
I like to like an interesting application I think that AI is actually kind of like well suited for, which is an interesting like I'm a huge evolution nerd like in research. I love that was like my undergrad degree, and I don't know, it's just like as a biologist, it's kind of, I feel like evolution is the language of biology. So any way that I can like use evolution in my research, it seems like a really cool way to test things, mutations in DNA, and having those mutations being tested versus something that I want to happen, right? And that's kind of versus the environment. And that is kind of the way that some research is being used for, it's called directed evolution. So basically organisms are evolved specifically for specific applications. So like, let's say, for example, what's done a lot in algae and chloroplasts is photosynthesis research. So a better Rubisco, and Rubisco is the colloquial hand that brings down the CO2 in order to engage photosynthesis. Sometimes it grabs O2. So if it's grabbing CO2 more, then it's actually better and gives us better photosynthetic process, more efficient.
Okay.
So the idea is, like, let's design a better Rubisco. There's this whole idea that, chloroplasts are from cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria, chloroplasts got evolutionarily trapped, so they weren't able to evolve like the best photosynthesis necessarily. They were just evolved to be endosymbiotes within this eukaryotic cell, right? So basically, we're trying to find different mutations on Rubisco that create that a better hand, that hand is only grabbing CO2. And how we do this now with the ability to synthesize DNA at massive amounts. So we create it's called mutant libraries. And then we can generate millions, billions of mutants. That's not the problem now. It's actually like figuring out which mutants and which combinations are actually going to do well to and work well together in order to grow better, in order to have to see like, oh, this one grew a lot better. Okay, so this one has the better Rubisco, right? So we're looking for higher growth. We're looking for faster rates of photosynthesis. But how do we test that? And so there's been a lot of ideas on using, that's just one example of directed evolution. There's a lot of different ways of doing directed evolution. There's ways of doing directed evolution outside of a cell. And this is with chemistry and chemical engineering, which is what Frances Arnold got the Nobel Prize for. I think it was in 2017. Absolutely incredible work. I linked a review by her in the chat. But it's a really interesting way. Using AI is an interesting way in that we could create a ability to look at multiple data sets and to figure out which mutant is actually performing better. So we could actually say, okay, we think this one's performing well. We think this one's performing well. We think this one's performing well. Based off of growth parameters, based off of phenotypics, genotypics.
That you feed the algorithm, right?
Yeah, it's about kind of like picking them, but then the cool thing, and this is what I think is crucial for these AI-based methods, is like testing them immediately after. So testing them against one another. So like, let's just see if like the iterative evolution-based one will actually work really well, or like this way crazy one that the AI one is actually thinking is actually doing a lot better than we thought. Let's test that one and throw that in the mix, and then let's test them all together. So it's kind of like an iterative testing, retesting kind of engineering approach that I think fits really well with like AI, and that's a good way of like fusing biology and AI-based learning, I think.
Right.
Yes.
Like the cross validation, like that's like a key of what machine learning does is it uses cross validation, which is like testing multiple times, testing to get the best prediction. And then you look at those models and see, okay, we know this one gave the best prediction, what was in it that gave us this best prediction, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see how, it could be applied to, you could come up with an application, honestly, in your own life and find a way to apply it. If you think that there's a way that you can, if there's something that's poorly or you want to test better, you have a benchmark that you can compare it to. you have a computer that can run R, you can, run some basic and get some pretty interesting, some pretty interesting results. Of course, it probably wouldn't publish in any kind of journal without like the background, like in biology or anything. But you can, at least again get an idea of how the models work in a practical way, so it isn't just some kind of scary witchcraft kind of thing that people throw out there when they claim that they're doing something new.
Yeah. Greg, I think like the story that you told about directed evolution, right? That's a broader, or sorry, a more specific example of like the broader notion of AI being a tool for driving innovation, right? That's something we hear about a fair amount, within biology, right? Is the drive for new methods and new innovations to capture these insights that we either are not capable of perceiving ourselves, or that we miss due to whatever blind spots and biases that we have as scientists. um my, I guess, qualm with it as a tool is that like when you're going through something like that, like on the technical level, like these are things, at least for the experiment that you described, like you can validate what this robot finds without needing the robot, the AI, the algorithm, like in the picture, right? Like it can predict something and then you can experimentally validate it, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so then so long as there's like a capacity to
Right.
Test.
confirm or test, yeah,
Right.
exactly, to test what the algorithms are throwing out there, insofar as the advancement of data, or in economics, if we're trying to predict how the rational consumer behaves, as long as they're generating testable hypotheses, then I don't think there's really that big of a problem insofar as like the day-to-day life of an academic. I think broadly speaking, a lot of this could be abused by larger corporate entities like a pharmaceutical company, for example, to be like, hey, don't regulate us, please. See, look at all of our big machine learning algorithms. I promise, we're innovating. We're totally making new antibiotics. We have our AI on it right now. That kind of thing. To me, it feels very much like a shield that a lot of either corporate entities, or in some cases like big research groups, just kind of hide behind to be like, yeah, we're being productive. We promise. We're just sticking our algorithms on everything we can, and
Right.
just kind of pressing run in R and letting everything else happen after the fact.
And who,
It,
who are the reviewers? The
yeah,
politicians who ask Zuckerberg, is my computer looking at me really when I'm in the shower? Like they don't, and that's we have like that's such a huge issue. Like people who are making our laws know nothing about how computers work. I think it's so staggering. Like
well, that would be something to advocate for, and on the broader subject, right? Like, just getting these common definitions out, like AI versus just a machine learning algorithm
right.
versus neural networks, like a lot of what you described from that like MIT introductory component. Like if people were at least equipped with the terminology to understand some of this, I think a lot of the fear mongering bullshit is insofar as like the government's looking at my pee pee when I'm in the shower, that you're gonna miss out on a lot of that. So I think the more people know, the more informed people are probably going to be, and more like okay with the rise of a lot of these algorithms and networks kind of either like running in the background of society, or sort of overtly interacting with them through like the YouTube algorithm, recommended Twitter feeds, random ass product recommendations on insert shopping website here. Like there'd be a greater degree of comfort with the tool if people knew a single solitary fucking thing about how it worked. But it still is not without issues.
In this case, like the directed evolution model, you'd be it's a machine learning application, right? So you're giving it a ton of different data sets that you don't know how are correlated together, and how you wouldn't analyze them and see how they're correlated. And then that would, and then they're going to be giving you the ones that grew the best, right? We all know they're going to confirm like, okay, that grew the best. But then these ones might be doing better if they were given the same choice of the other mutations and that kind of stuff. Because, I mean, Rubisco as a protein, there's trillions of different mutants that we can make, right? All the different, theoretically, every single amino acid could be different. with every single codon at every single point on the protein, and that's just not feasible. So that's just not possible. We can't do that. So we have to figure out which ones are going to be better. Is it good to have active site mutations? The active sites are like the fingertips. You're like, okay, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. Maybe taking off a finger theoretically, and improving one of your fingertips on another side might be able to give you that specificity for CO2 versus O2 that we just wouldn't see. I mean, the bigger question, and I think you're talking about this, Marcus, and I agree. It's like, well, would we get there eventually, without the AI? And I think that the answer is yes. It's just the ability to kind of like see with the data that we have, and then kind of going forward. And I share your I'm very scared about this, by the way, and this goes into why I'm more scared of like sequencing than I am of CRISPR necessarily, because you could have a lot of like race realists and stuff, and these mutations and stuff that they have found in their AI. Now we have these mutations that we know are linked to all these different traits that they don't like of immutable characteristics. That's what I can see that being the application for, and that's what I'm scared of.
Yeah, and that's another, I think, valid point to bring up, right? The memification of what AI outputs, right? Again, it's abuse of the tool, not a fault of the tool. Although there are a fair amount of racist academics who could make a racist AI to then justify their racism.
They already did.
Right, which is why it's like the best way to combat it is to learn more as much as and like which is the true with all the tools. But like we have if someone believes that 5G is going to come down and there's an alien, that's how is that going to solve our issues with police using using locational data to track people? Like it doesn't help that people are conspiracy theorists about everything, and and do very little. We are just talking about it now. We're not doing it right. Like
because then you get people like me who are so fed up with the conversation that we just.
Your opinion is fine. Like if you're just
okay.
Because I'm like that's rather than like going down a hole of like the you can end up in a lot of bad places. Like if you're just saying, hey, let someone else deal with it, I mean that's fine. Like that's I guess like right like but we do need, and like my myself, I'm just one person. I don't know anything about a ton of subjects, right? But I'm gonna like I don't know how to put up I don't know anything about electric work. I don't know how to put up a 5G thing. I'm gonna trust the guys who I know enough to be able to tell if 5G is actually having an effect on me or not. Like it's just like the basics of not believing corporate bullshit all the time.
I guess I guess my issue with AI is the same issue with people's concerns about CRISPR. It's just capitalism. Like there's nothing I can do about that being inherent to AI and the system that they operate in. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess since the rosebud is capitalism in that case, like I can be as much of an activist as I can, but beyond that, like they're never going to stop trying to increase their profit motives at this point. So,
well, yeah, but by that same token, right? Like if let's say you're engaging in anti-capitalist activism, and one of the many things you're calling for is regulation of these tools.
Yeah, I know.
They're going to use the tool against your anti-capitalist activism, so that way they can continue to use it unabated against the average, anti-capitalist, so to speak. Because that's the greater trend in society, right? Whatever tools, technology, or other things that the capitalists have at their disposal, they will absolutely use to punch left every single time. The YouTube algorithm has absolutely been weaponized in that respect, right? You get a lot of I actually just read a Twitter thread about this yesterday. I think a scientist has been trying to make a YouTube channel about fighting COVID misinformation, and the algorithm as it functions takes her shit down constantly, gives her strikes constantly, but all of the people who are spreading the actual conspiracy theories continue to do so unabated with zero strikes whatsoever. Like actual scientists and physicians are getting deplatformed off YouTube, whereas the conspiracy theorists are allowed to run rampant. And the way that's policed is they can hide behind the authoritative nature of this, science veneer of, oh yeah, the AI is doing it. Our proprietary algorithms have been specifically trained to recognize disinformation content. If this thing was taken down from our website, it clearly must have been false, even though it's coming from like somebody who has spent years and years and years getting an MD or a PhD.
No, the guys
Right,
they
but
hire at all of those things, like they, like they use, like they reduce it. I think it's such a issue of knowledge, and at least what we could do with the public is like we just, it's similar to like things of think of like smoking, or something like that, where there's like, like the public is misinformed about the actual effects of a product, or how a product can actually be used, what a tobacco plant could actually be used for. I don't know, and they're misinformed to believe, all kinds of things that in the end are really just profiting the corporation. And I don't think there's a way that we can, I think, yeah, like the idea of trying to stop AI is silly. But if we can, and again, like if you're saying like, I'm going to allow, like, I don't, I don't care to know all the details, or to, nerd out about it. I think that's fine, like largely. But I think it's like, as long as you have a mentality that is trying to understand how all kinds of tools in society are used against like the leftist movement, or used against workers, and if there's ways that workers can if there's ways that workers can kind of get back at it or not. I mean, there are, like, I was like kind of a positive, like I've been reading a lot about climate recently, because I'm doing a lot of, I have an advisor who's a big climate guy. And I'm reading a paper right now about this Apex ruling, which I never heard of before I found this paper. And basically it was a 2008 court ruling, which, long story short, made a whole bunch of corporations just pay for environmental damage that they had did in the past. Which in the past, the rule was that you could offload it as a claim in your when you go file for bankruptcy. And in 2008, it was changed primarily due to activists and academics who brought the research and showed that that their environmental damage was, one, a lot worse than what they said it was, two, that they knew about, like a whole bunch of, and enough to prove to the court of law that this corporation, even though it was defunct in 1987, and of course reincorporated, but like, there was a big spill, like, so that's where it was from, so it's like a long arc. But they did have to not only did they have to pay, but there's now like the new policy, or there's a new law that you cannot offload your climate destruction onto the taxpayers. That wouldn't have been done without like activists who were, so it's small little thing. And I think like the same kind of people, we should be thinking that way with AI. Is just that one, yeah, what ways can we use it positively? And like one of my favorite ways that they've used AI is predicting the racism of different things. So like using the benchmark of like a of course there always has to be a benchmark, right? So the looking at judges and how they sentence different people, and anything you've ever heard that you think about. Oh yeah, I think I heard a story about judges being, all of that comes from a research started 20 years ago of this question of using AI to predict racism, whereas previously they're like, that's something you can't predict, you can't determine what that is. And so like I think like using it for that, using it to prove that corporations are wrong about things, using it to like that's the way that we can fight, that we can use it in a positive way. And I think ignoring it is just leads to situations where things are affecting you and you don't recognize it because you're that out of the completely out of the loop, which it has happened to all of our parents who, like, in the 90s were like, don't learn about TV, don't learn about the internet. And now, of course, they use the internet and have no idea how to use it. They're just completely they believe everything they see or whatever. And it's like, what happened to you guys being so conscious in the 90s? It's just like you chose not to learn anything. You spent 20 years not learning anything, and now you're just like, it's so easily dumpstered and dumpstered by these algorithms that market to you. You don't do that because you grew up, you learn knowing how the internet works, knowing that I'm not going to trust an ad that goes by. If you choose not to learn anything and then are afraid of something, it doesn't make any sense. Like you need to, if you're afraid of something, you should, face your fears. Just face your fears.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty fair point. Education really being the tool to allow us to properly integrate AI into our society in a way that's sustainable, in a way that people can actually interact with it without the tool being abused for nefarious purposes by the powerful. Yeah,
It will be. Just like money, just like computers, just
exactly.
like
Nothing's perfect.
Trying to take away the it's just like it doesn't make any sense to think about that. You should try to find ways of using it to benefit you in the way you can in your life. Because it's just like, can you make small improvements in your own life? In the lives of the people around you. Can you go to your local, whatever group and teach someone something, or with AI, like using AI as a tool to, do more than what one person could do alone.
Right. It gives people a greater capacity that they never had before to affect change. All right. So I'm going to go around the horn real quick, I think, because we've probably reached a pretty natural conclusion to the discussion. I think that was a pretty decent note to kind of wrap up on. JJ, let me just have this be your last comment before we go to shoutouts. If there was one thing you wished anybody in the audience would take away about AI, what would that be?
Mine would be that it's just a few stages more than what you would learn in like a basic stats class, and just to recognize that it's a tool that can be used, but just to not get intimidated by marketers or whoever who is attempting to use it in a way that obviously it could be used for bad things, but just to be be vigilant and to try to read a little bit and to realize that it's not rocket science, and that it's nothing that is something that you can take some kind of agency over, at least in understanding it. And just don't let chuds or whoever intimidate you and thinking that you can't understand something because it's too complicated. And the computer scientists just don't understand the black box. Like, listen, they just don't do any inference on their neural network models. That's the answer. That's it. Just say that sentence. Okay, they just don't do any inference. That's all. That's and if they did inference, then they wouldn't be a black box anymore. And once they start doing inference, just like how they did with compilers and everything else that used to be called AIs, we all of a sudden understand it. It's no longer a black box. The target is moved. It's just, neural network models literally came out like 5 years ago. Like, it's just because there just hasn't been enough work on them. Like, the black box would not be black in 5 years. Like, the people are working on it, So it's just like, it's not magic. It's just another tool that you could use, and that would, of course, will be used against you, just like, money is used against you. But do you ever say, we don't need resources? It's like, we have to have resources some way or another.
All right. Fair points. Amber, final thoughts, broadly speaking? Or specifically, whatever you want it to be. We could go to Greg first if you want some more thinking time.
I'm so brain dead at this point. Like, this is not my area, and like, obviously I tend to not indulge this area with my thoughts anyway, which is probably not good. But yeah, I'd like to thank the chuds for making me immediately shut down anytime AI is brought up, or like surveillance. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, Well, I think if nothing else, because certainly if you continue a research career in cancer bio, as an example, you're going to run into neural networks and algorithms a ton. Like it's a big
Yeah.
fucking deal. So I guess this is more of a primer for you to like kind of start thinking about that,
don't
especially
want
as
it.
it's applied to your field. Yeah, it's annoying, and I'm not very computationally savvy. I'm gonna cry and piss my pants when I have to learn how to do my own RNA-seq, but I'm gonna have to do it eventually. So,
I
and there's
know.
gonna
I'm
be a
worried
thing.
about the stats stuff, but YOLO.
Yeah, I think that's digestible. If people manage to do it, I think it's learnable. We can get there.
I can be your co-author.
See, there you go, collaboration right here on the ministry. Greg, final thoughts on the topic as a whole.
Yeah, man. I think I'd love to have a professor on or someone that like researches with it, and that'd be so cool because it's like something that I've been trying to be exposed to, and it's just such a buzzword and stuff that, yeah, I'd love to talk to someone that uses it with their research or researches it currently, and to see kind of like what it is. I'm not like a doomer on AI. I'm an optimist in general, so. But I don't really feel like, like Elon Musk's fear mongering of like, AI is going to take over. Humans are inherently inefficient. They're going to make themselves so smart and efficient that they're just going to take us over. I mean, maybe, right? Who knows? But I just don't think that. I think that there's going to be some point that we could always have a kill switch or have that kill switch integrated into the software, the hardware. I don't see how humans are going to be completely bypassed, in every circumstance. So, yeah, I'm curious about it. I'm curious about it as a ways of, sifting through large amounts of data. I'm actually really interested in. We have so much genetic data out there, like you're talking about, Amber, like how can we figure out like what these things are? How can we figure out these ties together and stuff? Like for example, if you just gave AI through machine learning or I don't know what route to take, what would be the application, but like, could they find long non-coding RNAs, for example? That it exists, and they're like, there's something in here that doesn't there's some mechanism for molecular control that we're not accounting for, and it'd be interesting to see if they could actually like figure out if one of those existed. But otherwise, it's just kind of like it's a cool tool that I'm not. I mean, I've thought about using it. I wanted to do directed evolution in my research, so I've always looked at it, and JJ's right. Like you look at the tools and stuff, they make it so easy. Google Colab is where they do Collaboratory is basically where they have all of their coding environment for Google. So you can go there and you can actually use GPU cycles for free, which is insane. And so you can like spin up their AI models and stuff, and it's ridiculously easy to use. Like the functions are very simple, user friendly, and I've whenever I've tried that, I've like everything for coding, I just Google it and to see what the problem is, and then go forward. And I'm like in this weird world where I don't really know where I am after 5 steps. So, and I don't really know what it's taught me. Like I was saying before, like I don't know what if research is in that black room where it's all black, everything is, there's no lights, nothing, and you're kind of like searching for the walls, it feels like AI is kind of like a false door or a table or something in there, and you're like, is this the floor or is this the table? Like, how do you know? And it can be very I don't know. I just it's very hard
It's
for me to envision.
disorienting, right?
Yeah,
It's really difficult to orient yourself to learning some of this for the first time. Like once you get it, you get it, but
but
it's kind of difficult to like wrap your mind around how some of these things work as it pertains to what you're trying to do.
or how could you weight? Maybe you could weight things. You know, like could you give them like certain weights? Like as a biologist, do you know that like there's no way that there's no way that like if, for example, if we're going to use the protein, Rubisco protein, there's no way that 3 stop codons all in a row at the beginning is going to work. So, um, but I'm sure maybe that's tested early on in the process and that's fails and it goes on, or
Yeah, I mean,
I just
think
don't know about
that's
it.
yeah. I mean, in that specific example, it's probably like a component of what it's fed to be trained on, right? Training it on, like, yes, here's some of the shit that we know doesn't work. Like,
Hmm.
humans have done all this shit. This doesn't work, so don't consider it. Or
Hmm.
things like this, things similar to this, also don't consider that because it also has a high likelihood of not fucking working.
Yeah.
But then here's these spaces. Everything that is absent in the training data
Or
are
the
spaces
model
that
tells
haven't been
itself
explored.
what works and doesn't work. So you put, you only put the outcomes in. And like,
Right.
and actually what you were saying about like the Google stuff, like that's really, I really think like if you sit through like 1 or 2 seminars, all you need to learn is a pencil and a pen. Like to understand the basics of the machine, that you don't need anything else, just a pencil and a pen. And in a few lines, like it's not, and then once you're able to like, okay, see the math, like all the questions you ask, like about weighting and all, those are all mathematical issues that
Hmm.
a professor in this subject could easily, like I said, I took a class. I didn't want to like dox myself and say my professor's name, but you can go find classes online at least, and you being an academic, like you can email these guys, and they love talking about themselves. They'll email you
Yeah,
back, and
it's
they'll tell
true.
you whatever. You so go ahead, do it, go ahead, and they will answer your questions better than I can. Better than if after going through that, because the questions you ask are very uh first of all, you're grounded. You know a lot of stuff, and like you have an idea of what the tool can be used for. So your questions are very reasonable questions that I think those questions I've answered. And like if a guy like you can understand it, then you could be one of the good guys who are using it you know, to teach others at least, like, or to help, to use it or to prove or show that things are bullshit. To
Yeah.
call out bullshit, like, yeah, we could do this and that, but we can't do that with it, and to be able
Yeah.
to call that out. Like that would be, that's all you need to be able to do. Is like you don't need to know, you don't necessarily need to, you don't need to see the mathematical model more than once, like or something. Like you don't need to be able to calculate something out by hand because you could just go to the Google thing and you do that and do right. You don't,
Hmm.
but if you see it once or twice, again, like with some training, I think like, you being about you have enough, you understand like what derivative is and some basic stuff that you can answer get those questions answered about like weighting and stuff like that, and so you can see how it can be used as like the application you just came up with. How would I've never thought about that. I'm not a biologist. I have no idea what you even said. All right, coding something long. I don't know. I'm sure you could do it. Right? Like, and so you could think of actual applications that I or any other economist can never think of. Right. So when you leave it
Hmm.
to us to do causality, it's an issue, and that's like one of the issues with econ. Right? Is that like, please, someone else give your input if you have it.
Right. That makes some good sense. All right. I think we'll probably wrap up here and go to shout outs. I think, I guess, closing sentiment for me is that when Reed brought this up in the ministry Discord, kind of behind the scenes, he was talking about how his students were actually debating like the concept of AI personhood. Like, could an AI be considered a person? But I think, like, as the output of our discussion, it seems like there's one, way too much to solve, and two, like, we're still probably stuck on the issue of like, is this tool something that should be allowed in society or not, and if so, how should it be controlled / regulated? Right. I think that was a component of the Google Doc that Reed had on the broader issue of AI personhood. I think there's like a whole like 2 or 3 pages dedicated to like how should AI be regulated. That AI is inevitable, it will be here, it's going to be in society, and it already is in some capacity, but like, how do we regulate it? It sounds like that last component, the regulation component, is probably going to be the broader like debate topic in a couple of weeks. Like, what to what degree should we allow AI to be in society? You know, that kind of down that road. So we'll probably workshop it with Reed behind the scenes just to get like a more concrete, like, okay, here's the very specific question that we're debating, kind of like we did last time with like, should we do gene editing in society? Yes or no, right? There's a very binary yes or no. So I think we can probably use the output of this discussion, talk to Reed, and be like, okay, you know, what do you think our debate question specifically should be, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, in regards to this, there's a really cool Star Trek Next Generation about this. It's a really cool question. Like Data has a child that's made from his code, and the question's whether or not that child is Data's sibling, or like not child. Yeah, that child is Data's. Like, is it Data's thing? So then, if it is Data's property, then like is he alive? Like, does he have like ownership rights? Does he have private ownership rights and all that kind of stuff? It was a really cool episode if anyone is interested in this idea. So
yeah, that's absolutely something that we could probably bring up during that that debate for sure, depending on positions. All right, let's
maybe
go
I
around
don't.
the horn.
Maybe it's too good of an example, and I don't bring it up. You don't know.
Well, I mean, we haven't even picked sides yet, so you know, I think wait to see what side you want to be on / wind up on, and then we could go from there.
Devil's advocate, always.
Yeah, I'm so primed to be a fucking Luddite. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to be a fucking nobody could ever have anything caveman piece of shit. So yeah, that's right, brother. We ain't got no newfangled libtard robots. We're doing everything with a good old elbow grease, the old-fashioned way. No robot oil, no computers.
Very nice.
All right. On that note, let's go around the horn and do shout-outs. We'll start with you, JJ. Go ahead and plug yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, you can find me on, now I know what I should say, right? Twitch.tv.
Yeah, I got you.
Young_Black Rat. Okay, one day I'm going to stream. All right, it's going to happen like this weekend. Look. I bought this and I haven't installed it yet because I've just been busy with other stuff. But as soon as I get it in, and then I'm going to play Call of Duty, maybe this weekend. So you can come watch me and then you can harass me in my chat, so hope to see you soon.
That'll be fun. All right, Amber, you're next.
I'm DN Amber. The DN stands for D's Nuts.
Classic.
I got the sunglasses on so I can do the fucking sound. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter, I guess, DN Amber _, because someone has DN Amber and I'm going to find her.
Rude.
And I'm going to politely message her and ask. For, no, I'm just kidding.
Change your name right now, please.
I did that on WoW once because someone had the name Amber without any special characters. So I sent them a letter in the WoW mail, and I was like, "Hey, my name is actually Amber, and I doubt yours is. So if anyone's got the credentials for this, it's me." But anyway, follow me on Twitter. I don't really stream anymore though, so too much shit to do at work.
Not feel you. All right, Greg, last but not least, go for it.
I got a YouTube channel. You can go there at thepeer.review. Got a fire debate dropping tomorrow with Rob Noor. So that's a good one. Basically, after trying to debate all these Republicans on climate change and the climate change parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, I found myself at the biggest Republican streamers of Twitch. So I got the number 2 largest Republican on Twitch. So that was a really interesting discussion. Honestly, I was really surprised at how he wanted to go through the data and go through the parts of the bill. I was really surprised. So I think that's premiering tomorrow at 1 p.m. PST. And then next week is a real banger. I'm hoping that Gremlo's here for that one because I want to see his face. So check it out.
All right. Sounds like a good plan, Greg. I'll see how much brain rot I can fucking stomach. It's probably not much since I'm usually shoving it down by the fistful anyway, so I might already be at my tolerance by the time I get to your content, but I'll still give you the +1 regardless.
Thanks, pal.
Yeah, of course, dude. That's what we're here for. All right, friends, thank you so much for your time and for your insights into this particular topic. We'll workshop behind the scenes, see what Reed thinks we can do in terms of a debate in 2 weeks from this day. So again, as a reminder to both you three and everybody in chat, ministries are now Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So that's when you can expect to tune in, and that is when we will have a debate about AI in some capacity. I will hammer out the specifics behind the scenes, but I think that is
next week the fun week.
Yeah, so next week on the ministry, it's going to be our game night. So it's going to be me, you, Greg, and Grem, since Played Up only has 4. So sorry, JJ, we were playing a dumb Steam game where we
I'm
make
gonna
food.
be writing something.
It's very serious. I demand to be taken seriously.
And don't forget the 10 minutes of ASMR from all of the ministry members before we play, of course.
A lot of this.
Oh, I'll be in the chat for sure.
We're all gonna
For that
whisper.
especially.
We're all gonna whisper about enzymes and DNA.
We can seductively whisper about all sorts of scientific topics.
I have questions about what actual biologists do.
Oh,
It
yeah.
basically
You could
moves small
certainly-
amounts of liquids from one tube to the other. That's it.
Yeah, that's
That's
it.
it.
Sometimes we
act
get to
shocked
play with
when-
mice.
Oh God, yeah.
What is a lab? What do you do in there? I don't know.
I really
Yeah.
wanted to, when I was
Yeah.
streaming, I really wanted to take my phone and put it in my lab coat pocket and just like stream the whole day at work, but like also research, and you have to keep that shit under wraps. So
Yeah, I've contemplated doing that even if my university's Wi-Fi wasn't shit. But next week I'll have to tell everybody the story about the blood pendulum, because at that point, if I was to do that, I would have been banned for TOS. I walked into an absolute mouse massacre.
there
last
is
week.
definitely TOS at the lab, in a mouse lab. So
Yeah,
lots
I was,
of it.
It was very TOS in a way I did not
It's
expect.
very depressing. Some days I have to go home and drink wine. It gets bad.
Because of the mice specifically. because of
Oh
the
yeah.
mice?
Yeah, there's a lot of murder that is somehow still
wow.
humane and approved by ethics committees, but brutal as fuck at the end of the day.
Or inflicted upon their own, which is
True, they do eat their children a lot
mhm.
and hurt themselves
Those
and
are
other
the
mice.
tests that we can't do in econ that we would like to test. You know, like what happens if you killed someone this way or that way? Well, you know, what are the impacts? But we
It's
just
true.
can't-
Humans are like literally the worst.
Some
science
knowledge is better
subjects.
left unknown.
Like humans are so they're bad test subjects. They don't take their medications every day. They don't do the
Yep,
same
yep.
thing every time. It's like you can't get enough of them. You need millions of them, it's in order to do mutations and that
Welcome
kind of
to
stuff.
the world
You
of
can't do that.
econ, where we try to predict human behavior
Yeah,
based on
it's-
a whole bunch of stuff that happens.
We're
in the past.
unpredictable creatures of habit. That's a
Yeah.
weird oxymoron.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I gotta go do dad stuff, so it's great talking to you guys as always.
All right.
Of course, yeah. Thanks again, folks, and we'll be
Right.
in touch about the AI topic and game night next week.
All right, sweet man.
Yeehaw.